Here's an introduction to graphing linear equations. Well, what is a linear equation? Again, we talked about that a couple of times ago. An equation, when graphed, is a line. So make sure that when you do graph them, you do get a line, because if you don't, then you'll know you've done something wrong. How do you graph a line using the XY table method? And make sure we're using the table method here. And that is, we're going to pick 3 or 4 numbers for the domain. That would be your x's. From that, we can determine what the range is. Remember the tables we were making the other day. We're going to plot those points, and from those points, we'll be able to draw our line. Here's what we mean by that. Y is equal to 2x minus 1. Now, we're going to make a table. It's called the XY table or XY chart. X is always on the left, Y is on the right. If we were doing a horizontal table, the X's would be top and the Y's would be on the bottom. Anyway, we're going to pick some numbers for X. So let's use some numbers pretty close to 0, -1, 0, 1, and 2. I always pick 4 when I'm doing the table method just because that's what I've always done. Well, I'm going to put -1 in for X because I'm going to determine what Y is, right? So 2 times -1 is -2 minus 1 is -3. When I plug in 0 for x, I'll get 0 minus 1 is -1. 2 times 1 is 2, minus 1 is 1. 2 times 2 is 4, minus 1 is 3. And this will give me the coordinates -1, 3. Excuse me, -1, -3. I have 0, -1, 1, 1, and then 2, 3. I can draw my line. When you draw your lines, please use a straight edge. Take your line all the way across the graph. And there's your line. And number 2, again, make your XY table. On X, again, I'm going to use -1, 0, 1, and 2. It's usually my standard go-to points, go-to numbers. Not always, but oftentimes. Now be careful here, because when we put in a -1 in for the X, this says the opposite of whatever X is. Well, what's X? -1. What's the opposite of that? +1. 1 plus 4 is 5. When I plug in 0, 0 plus 4 is 4. When I plug in 1, I'll get -1 plus 4 is 3. And when I plug in 2, I'll get -2 plus 4 is 2. And when I plot those points, -1, 5 is here. 0, 4 is here. 1, 3 is here. 2, 2 is here. And again, use a straight edge. Take your line all the way across the graph. These are not turning out to be very good lines. Hang on here. Let's try that again. And it'll look something like that. Now in number 3, what's different about this? What's different is we don't have y by itself here. So I have to get the y by itself. How am I going to do that? By subtracting 4x from both sides of the equation. Now remember how we want this. It'll be 2y is equal to whatever the x term is, that's going to come first. It's -4x and then a +10. We're going to now divide through by 2, and I'll get y is equal to -2x plus 5. Pick my numbers for x. Again, -1, 0, 1, and 2 would be fine. -2 times -1 is +2. 2 plus 5 is 7. 0 plus 5 is 5. -2 times 1 is -2 plus 5 is 3. -2 times 2 is -4 plus 5 is 1. Now, keep in mind, all right, in this particular case, we get -1, +7. We're a little bit off the graph. That's not a problem. 0, 5 would be here. 1, 3 is here. 2, 1 is 2 to the right and 1 up. Draw your line. In number 4, again, we need to get the y by itself, so I need to subtract 2x from both sides of the equal sign. 3y is equal to -2x minus 6. I'm going to divide through by 3, And I get the equation y is equal to negative 2/3 x minus 2. Now this time though, when I pick my numbers for x and y, normally if I were to pick -1, 0, 1, and 2, oh, this could get ugly. I'm going to have all kinds of fractions here. And that would be fine. We could do that as well. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to arrange it so the fractions cancel out. Well, what number could I multiply, put in the place of x? What could I take negative 2/3 times in order to cancel out the denominator? Threes. In this case, multiples of 3. So whatever the denominator is, use multiples of that number, and that'll cancel out the denominator. So I'm going to use -3, 0, 3, and 6. So I'm going to take negative 2/3 times -3. The 3's are going to cancel out. I have negative 2 times -1 is 2 minus 2 is 0. Plug -3 in for x and you'll get 0. When I use 0, I get 0 minus 2 is -2. -2 minus 2 is -4. -4 minus 2 is -6. And I'll have my points -3, 0. 0, -2. 3, -4. And 6, -6. Draw your line, and we're done. There's another way we can graph lines, and that is by using the x and y intercepts. Guarantee this will be on the semester final. So the x-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis. Excuse me, the x-axis, sorry. And the y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis. Now here's something special about the x-intercept. Y is always going to be equal to 0. And for the y-intercept, x is always going to be equal to 0. So when graphing a line using the x and y-intercepts, plug in 0 for y to get the x-intercept. Then you're going to plug in 0 for x to get the y-intercept. Plot your points and draw the line. All right, so here's what it's going to look like. Make a table where you have x and y. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in 0 for y. That means I'm going to put a 0 here for the y. So when 0 goes in for the y, this term disappears because y is equal to 0. That gives me 3x is equal to 15. I divide both sides by 3, and I get x is equal to 5. Then what am I going to do? Well, the next thing we're going to do is plug in 0 for the y. Excuse me, for the x. So I put a 0 here for the x. That makes that term disappear. I have -5, y is equal to 15. Divide both sides by -5, and you get -3. So here are the 2 points that we're going to be plotting. 5, 0 is here. That's your x-intercept. 0, -3 is here. That's your y-intercept. From there, you can draw your line. And we're done with that one. In number 2, XY table. I'm going to plug in 0 for the y. I'm going to put a 0 here. That'll cause that term to disappear. I divide both sides by 2, and I get x is equal to 5. What am I going to do next? Well, I'm going to put a 0 in for the x. That makes that term disappear. I divide both sides by 5, and I get y is equal to 2. So y is equal to 2, and I plot those 2 points. So I go to 5, 0, 0, 2, and I draw that line, and we're done. And number 3, 4x plus y is equal to 8. If we use this number, we're going to get off the graph. So how about if we do this? How about if we make that 8 a 4 instead? Make a table. Again, note I'm changing this problem. I'm taking out that 8 and putting it in a 4. I'm making it 4 instead. So I'm going to put in a 0 for the y. Makes that term disappear. Divide both sides by 4, and x is equal to 1. What do I do next? Well, I put in a 0 for the x. So when I put a 0 in for the x, that term disappears. And what is y equal to? Y is now equal to 4. So I go to the point 1, 0, put a point. That's my x-intercept. I go to 0, 4, put a point. That's my y-intercept. And draw the line. Y is equal to 3x minus 6. A little bit different story here. A little bit, not a whole lot. We have x and y. I'm going to put my 0 in for the y first. That disappears. That's a 0 though, right? In this case, I'm going to have to add 6 to both sides. 6 is equal to 3x. Divide both sides by 3, and I get x is equal to 2. Then I'm going to put my 0 in for the x. That makes that disappear. What's y equal to? Negative 6. So I go to 2, 0, 0, negative 6, draw my line. And that's how you draw lines using x and y intercepts.